Before we dive into our conversation on Singapore's economy under PM Lee, Dr. Felix, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Well, hi, I'm Dr. Felix Tan. I'm currently teaching international relations at a local university, but I can be called an independent political observer at this point in time. We'll just leave it as that.
Okay, let's start with a broad overview. How do you think Singapore's economy has performed in the 20 years under PM Lee's watch?
Not wanting to sound really old, I've been through the Lee Kuan Yew era, the Goh Chok Tong era, the Lee Hsien Loong era, and now I'm probably heading into the Lawrence Wong era. And I think in each phase, we do see lots of economic changes. In the past, we saw that growth was more towards certain industry, and it helped the domestic population, right, to get jobs. Then of course the Goh Chok Tong era, which was finding a balance of introducing Singapore into the global market. And then of course Lee Hsien Loong era, where we saw how he drove Singapore's economy and really raised the bar up. And I think you saw a lot more foreign investments. And suddenly Singaporeans felt that they need to compete on a different level. And not least digitization, right? And I think that is something that has really overtaken the economy.
Okay, let's discuss some of the key stats that I have here. The economy has grown 2.3 times in the last 20 years, but the nation's rate of economic growth is slowing down actually, especially compared to other ASEAN countries. Do you have any comments on that?
Well, I think if you look at the trend, Singapore was riding on the wave of investments and of economic development. We were, on the high, so to speak. But I think, after a while, things will slow down. And I think this is normal for any countries that is, successful. We can take, for example, Japan, which were very successful in the 80s and perhaps in the 90s, before China took over. So I think there's always this period where you're up there, and then after that, you'll slow down a little bit. So I think Singapore is no different.
What were some of the key economic growth points or new policies that had a major impact on the economy?
The whole new global economy that we were entering into, at least in the 2000s, was so unpredictable. Nobody expected such scenarios to begin with. Not least, COVID-19. I think that is definitely a huge hurdle. We were all grappling with, with how to handle it, drawing into our reserves. There was also the financial crisis that hit us, much earlier in 2008. And I think importantly, we have to look at these issues as them being unprecedented. So I do have to say that we have to give kudos to the government for being able to manage that sort of crisis that we entered into.
Were there any unpopular decisions made by PM Lee? And how did that turn out?
For one, I think it's also about attracting foreign talent, which I mentioned earlier. This was riding on the wave of the white paper, of an increase in Singapore's population. I think Singaporeans already felt that pinch, that squeeze, that we are now fighting for the same job market as foreigners. And I think it was very unpopular in that sense that Singaporeans felt as if they were sidelined, and that affected a lot of government policies moving forward. Of course, the government did its best to say that, okay, Singaporeans first. That was really one of the areas that I think Singapore government might have gone a little bit too fast without realizing what could the possible ramifications be. So let's talk about things like the integrated resort. There were a lot of Singaporeans, and not least parliamentarians, that were very much against this idea of the casino in Singapore. I think it was a question of morality. But now, more than 10 years later, and we are reaping the benefits of the IR. Truth be told, that Singapore has been known to focus very much on the economy and to drive the economic growth. But I think we have to understand that we have a history of being pragmatic and practical. The story of how Singapore came about, it's always about survival. And I think that has led to the situation where the only thing for Singapore is to grow its economy. And I think taken to an extreme end, it becomes a problem because you negate the needs of its people. Just to focus on the economy might end up not being fair to the other areas of development, in terms of the soft skills, in terms of the heart of the people. And I think we have seen that in the many speeches, not least from Madam Halima, our former president, where she talks about inequality, where she talks about being fair to all Singaporeans, all walks of life. So suddenly we realize that, this whole focus on the economy cannot be the answer or the solution to everything in Singapore. But we need to find that balance.
That's a very great point. I think that's why they are transitioning into this new 4G team, where you can see that it's more about the social compact of Singaporeans rather than economic growth.
Economic growth at the expense of what? I think that is something that we all need to think about.
So how will things change with the succession of Lawrence Wong? Do you think the government views on economic growth will be different?
I don't think there'll be huge differences. The basic policies, the fundamentals will remain as it is. PAP relies on that. It thrives on that, those fundamentals, and that will not change. But I have to also raise that DPM Lawrence Wong will have to strike out, with his own plan. And if you look at the Forward SG, a lot more of these plans are for the people, more of social issues, inequality, for example, whether you are able to provide for all and eradicating, racial, ethnic lines and that, and also be more inclusive, be more diverse. I think these are important issues, and I am so looking forward to what his plans will be.
Could you also comment on the two distinct leadership styles?
For each generation of leaders that we see, they will always strike out to be different. And I think the kind of leadership that we are perhaps seeing is a more kinder, softer, someone who will listen to the people more rather than saying that, okay, these are my decisions, take it or leave it. There are more opportunities that I do foresee under Lawrence Wong. I think what is important for the next generation of leaders, it's take criticism constructively. Not all criticism against policies are necessarily with bad intent. Some are with genuine concerns. So I think these are perhaps some areas that the new leadership might want to look at.
All right, that's it. Thank you so much, Dr. Felix, for sharing your views with us.
You know what?